Saudi Arabia once tried to bribe a prince of the UAE's Al Nahyan family to cede control of a desert oasis suspected of containing vast quantities of oil. The sheikh rejected the offer to betray his family, and Saudi Arabia launched a failed invasion of the territory. That is how the late journalist David Holden summed up the legendary 1950s Brahimi dispute between the Saudi royal family, Oman, and the Trucial States, which would become the United Arab Emirates, in his classic 1966 book, Farewell to Arabia. The sheikh the Saudi Arabians tried to bribe, by Holden's telling, was Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, then known as the Lord of Brahimi, but remembered in history as the founder of the UAE. His son, President Mohammed bin Zayed, is now locked in his own nasty spat with another Saudi family member, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The two Gulf states are at loggerheads in almost every theater imaginable in the Middle East, from the coast of the Red Sea to war-torn Yemen and global energy markets. Diplomats and business people say their feud will play a major role in defining the Middle East's future, particularly as the United States' staying power in the region is called into question by the US-Israeli war in Iran. The divergence between these two states may even impact the pocketbooks of consumers in Asia, Europe, and the US. Look no further than the UAE's decision to pull out of the Saudi Arabian-led oil cartel, OPEC, in May. On the surface, Abu Dhabi left OPEC after 60 years because it differed with Riyadh over how to manage production. The UAE has invested heavily in capacity so it can produce a greater amount of oil. Abu Dhabi wants to increase production and take profits now in the belief that the oil in the ground might be worth less in 2 or 3 decades. Saudi Arabia has more than double the oil reserves of the UAE and wants to manage global supply to support prices long term. But beneath these technicalities lie a fundamental difference. OPEC was founded by Saudi Arabia and other countries, including Iraq and Venezuela, in 1960. The 7 Emirates that comprised the UAE were once known as the Trucial States. They were some of Britain's last colonial possessions. The UAE was not declared a state until 1971. Over the last 50 years, the UAE has emerged as an energy powerhouse, but also a global business and tourism hub. Dubai's successful utilization of its oil revenue in the 1970s and the 1980s to become a trade and finance entrepot is the model for many Gulf states today, as they look to diversify their economies. For centuries, the families and tribes that inhabited the Gulf Coast were wary of the tribes of Najd, the Central Arabian region from which the Al Saud family hails. Now, the UAE believes it has outgrown deferring to Saudi Arabia. President Mohammed bin Zayed approach to the region, some analysts say, is a 21st century spin of older rivalries, turbocharged by oil wealth and technology. In 2009, the UAE withdrew from the Gulf Cooperation Council Monetary Union project, dealing a blow to plans for a single Gulf currency. The UAE was angry that the council's headquarters would be in Riyadh rather than Abu Dhabi. But many outside observers have been surprised by the reappearance of the UAE-Saudi Arabian rift. That is because, for a short period of time, both countries cohered in opposing the Arab Spring protest movements that swept across the Middle East in 2011, which they believed threatened regional stability and their monarchies. They also saw a common enemy in Iran. In 2014, they joined forces to launch war against Houthis in Yemen, who they saw as Iranian proxies. Diplomats and analysts say the two countries' coherence was helped by the fact that President Mohammed bin Zayed took the younger Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman under his wing in 2015. As he was coming to power. That moment has faded. Saudi Arabia has grown wary of the UAE's attempt to increase its power across the region by supporting proxies operating outside of state institutions. For example, in Yemen, the two countries' alliance unraveled over the UAE's support for the Southern Transitional Council, a separatist movement that wants to return to the Cold War-era borders of Yemen when the country was divided into North and South. Just before the war in Iran broke out in February, Saudi Arabia launched strikes against the UAE's successionist partners in Yemen. Likewise, across the Red Sea in Sudan, the UAE has backed the Rapid Support Forces, a paramilitary movement accused of committing genocide that is locked in a brutal civil war with the Sudanese armed forces. MEE was the first to reveal how seriously their ties were strained in Sudan, with a report that Saudi Arabia lobbied the US against the UAE for backing the Rapid Support Forces paramilitary. In all of these theaters, Saudi Arabia sees an attempt by the UAE to expand its strategic depth in the region by controlling strategic slivers of territory. Riyadh wants to preserve the status quo and fragile borders of the region, whereas the UAE sees these state institutions as a hindrance. On one hand, their geographies and histories explain their priorities. Saudi Arabia is the Arab world's largest economy. It is home to Mecca and Medina, the two holiest cities in Islam. The kingdom also has vast strategic depth, the value of which has been underscored amid the war in Iran, with Saudi Arabia able to continue exporting 70% of its pre-war volumes of oil because of a pipeline running from the Gulf to the Red Sea. In contrast, the UAE is home to 10 million residents, of whom only 1 million are Emirati nationals. But again, there is another layer to their differences that goes back to how the UAE and Saudi Arabia view differences of opinion in their countries and within the wider Arab and Muslim world. Saudi Arabia was quicker to patch up ties with Qatar after the Gulf Rift. Although Abu Dhabi was a signatory to the 2021 Al-Ula Agreement, which officially ended the blockade, it has continued to have a chilly and suspicious relationship with Doha. The UAE says it is opposed to Islamists in Sudan and Yemen. Saudi Arabian analysts are quick to point out that Riyadh is dedicated to combating extremism and terrorism, but is committed to national institutions. Somaliland is a case in point. Saudi Arabia and most other Arab states were quick to condemn Israel's recognition of the Somali breakaway region earlier this year, whereas the UAE has military and economic links to the region and was quiet. Many diplomats and analysts say that Saudi Arabia is more attuned to the so-called Arab Street and building consensus, whereas the UAE is more comfortable challenging those norms. Look no further than Israel. Saudi Arabia says that it will only normalize ties with Israel if a Palestinian state is created. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman publicly said Israel committed a genocide in Gaza. In contrast, the UAE has deepened its ties to Israel amid the war in Iran. Some thought that Iran's attacks on the Gulf in retaliation for the US and Israeli war would mend fences between Abu Dhabi and Riyadh. Instead, it appears to have galvanized them. The UAE is doubling down on its relationship with Israel, whereas Saudi Arabia is leaning into its ties with established regional actors like Egypt and Pakistan, in addition to Turkey. How Saudi Arabia and the UAE manage their differences and navigate these competing blocs will determine the future of the Middle East.